Hey, what's up, guys? I'm going to be answering a couple questions that were sent to me from somebody through my email, which happens a little bit. Humble Hunter, appreciate you sending these questions over. So the first question was, what type of line and weight? I'm using 6-pound test, and I'm using about 1/16 ounce in almost all of my videos. Unless I'm a little deeper, I would put on an eighth, and sometimes I'll put a 32, but I'm like most 99% of the time using 1/16. I like to have a jig that has a little bit more openness to it, meaning a bigger hook on it, and I like it to be parallel. The hook and where the jig body sits, I like it to be parallel. What weight jig? One jig per line, question mark, is the second question. One weight, what weight jig? Like I said, 1/16. Definitely, unless it's springtime, use one jig head per line. I've used two in the past in the fall, and it did not do well for me. I've tried it in the winter. Again, it did not do well for some reason, and I think the crappies think that maybe it's sort of an ambush sort of thing where the fish is by itself when they see that. I think maybe they liked seeing that one sort of minnow shad just sitting out there by itself, injured or whatever, and they go for it a lot more often times than when there's two. Maybe they're scared of it or something, I don't know. Additional weight on line, if so, how many ounces? I will put a weight on to help keep the jig where I want it in the water column. So if I'm sitting at about 10 feet, for example, like I was that day, I knew right away before I even got in the boat, I knew that I'm going to be shooting for about 5 feet. Just as a start, 5 would be, right in the middle column. And I guessed it right. I caught a lot of fish as soon as I got to where I was going. I think I caught 5 on the way there. As soon as I got there, I caught 2 really nice keepers. But as I found out from somebody today, he caught a ton of large ones right under the trees in about 3 feet of water. So they're really shallow right now, and they may have been moving in and out. But anyway, that's sort of the information I got from one of the guys that I fish with. So I'm going to be heading out there trying to catch some tomorrow in the shallows tomorrow morning. So using the weight to be any deeper at this point in time would be pointless because they're so used to being in the hot water. The water's cooling off now, so they're all moving in shallower. But if you needed to use weight on the line, you'd want to use anything that keeps you down there, especially when you're trolling. Anything that keeps the jig where you want it, but also not enough to pull the bobber under. I use pretty big weighted bobbers, as big as you can get them, as visible as you can get them. So that way, for instance, in this same example, 10 feet, I want it to be at about 5. So if I wanted to go really fast at 5, I would take a split shot that was pretty heavy, and I would probably like a 1/4 ounce, put it right at about 4 feet down from the bobber, and then the jig would be at about 7, and then I would go as fast as I can in the boat, maybe at like a 4, not a 5, maybe like a 4, and then that jig will raise up, but it won't raise up past that 4 ounce. Probably be right in line with it. That's when you want to use a split shot. You really don't need to use it in the fall though. That's more of a summer thing to keep it low to the bottom, or a winter thing to keep it sort of, again, low to the bottom wherever they're hanging out. And in the winter is a whole different game. You kind of want to dead stick it a lot of the times. You don't want to be trolling for them in the winter. Just sort of like ice fishing. How far is the float from the jig head? Again, I was at 10 feet. It's a mathematical equation. You kind of want to picture in my example, I'm at 10 feet. I don't know where the fish are. If the fish are sitting at 8 feet, then what I want to do is have my jig at 9 feet, and then I want to be going at about 3 on the trolling motor. I have a 40 thrust, so that way it won't sit at 8 feet. 16 ounce is probably going to rise up to about 7.5, even 6. 7.5 to 6, depending on the speed. If I'm going 4, it might be all the way up at 6. So if they're sitting at about 8 or 9, the crappies, they'll actually move up and they'll snatch it. You gotta remember, you always have it nearest to them without going under. If you go under, the crappies do not bite. It has to be level with them, right, or right above them is preferred. Right above them, about half a foot. That is like the sweet spot. And that's something you can play around with once you're actually trolling. You'll notice, okay, I'm getting a bite every time I pass by this tree. I'm getting bites. So that's when you know you're at the sweet spot. Do I use a swivel? I do not. Your exact question was, do you use a swivel between the float and the jig? I don't, and I don't recommend you using it unless you're trying to figure out the color of the lake. Now, if you fish the lake a lot, you probably already know, like, in the spring this color works, in the summer this color works, fall this color works, winter this color works. Don't deviate from that, even if you're trolling. If all those fails, use a natural bait and make sure that you put a nibble on there, or a scent, or both. This day I was using both, and you can see the results. So don't ever let anybody tell you, hey, use one or the other. Hey, use both if you have it, if you can afford it. It's really affordable, way more affordable than buying minnow. How is your float? How far is your float behind a boat was your next question. So that all depends on you, but for the most part, it really doesn't matter. I've noticed it really doesn't matter. I've caught fish right under the boat with the motor going. I've caught fish way far away from the boat. It really doesn't matter, but you definitely want to keep the rods a little separated. And I don't really have rod holders at this time. I'm trying to get some, but I just sort of set the rods in their designated areas, and they do work like that. So the boat speed, again, you got to kind of think about that math problem that we talked about earlier. I'm at 10 feet. I want the jig sitting right nearest to them, about a half a foot above. So maybe they're at 5 feet out of the 10. So I'm gonna have my bobber sitting probably 7 feet up, and I'm gonna be going 4 if they like it fast. Okay, so 7 feet from the bobber is gonna put it right at about 4.5, right above them, a couple feet to 3 feet above them, just waving around right in front of their faces and right above their heads. They're gonna see it and they're gonna strike right away. Or if they like it slow, maybe you gotta have it a little bit higher. Instead of 7 feet, bring it up to 6. Do a 2. For some reason that day they didn't like it slow, they liked it fast. So I was going 3 to 4, and I had it at about 7, 6.5, 7, and I believe they were sitting at about 5 feet. So that's exactly what I was doing. If they had been higher, all I would have done was moved my bobber down, would have raised my jig up, and I would have kept going fast, and then I would have slowed it down. I would have kept going every half foot to a foot until I started getting bites, because I know that they're in that area. As long as you know your lake and know your colors, it's all a matter of really finding the strike zone, like you mentioned. So that's the biggest question, or the biggest, I guess, thing to figure out is the strike zone. The strike zone is always a foot, half a foot above them. As long as you have scent and you have a nibble, something on there that's going to make them actually keep hold of it, just find the strike zone. Keep playing with it. It doesn't take but 10 minutes to find the strike zone. For me, I already knew from last year and the year before, in the fall, this lake at this time, they're going to be here on these trees that are 10 feet down, and I knew that because of the temperature and the pressure on this lake, I knew that they were for sure were going to be right there. So it's last question, when your boat is moving at your desired speed, how far below the surface is your jig? Again, it all comes into the equation. Once you figure out where exactly they are, at what time of year. It's all just a matter of passing it right by their faces. It's a lot of fun because you don't really have to work hard. Once you play with the bobbers, like for instance, I had all 4 of my rods sitting at about 6 to 7 feet, and that was it. I have a heavy bobber on there, 1/16th ounce jig. I was using a darker, I would say not really monkey milk. I think it's called Pepper by Bonehead Tackle, one of the pepper colors. Sort of like a little bit of blue glitter in there. But it was clear with some black specks on it. And that's just what they were going after. And then I switched to the white. White started doing work. You can kind of play around with it. Whatever works for you. Just use what you know works first, and then go from there.